how would you like to achieve your first million? And today we have Mark, a productivity consultant. And Mark, tell us, what are the 5 steps to make your first million?
Welcome to Unstoppable Podcast with Harry Sardinas, inspiring conversations with influential millionaires, investors, thought leaders, entrepreneurs who are making a massive difference with their innovative products and services, and sharing the challenges and wisdom of how they sold their first million.
I have a little experience in that. I invented a electronic device called a time quarter. We can talk about that a little more. And so I'm well over a million. And one of the things I did a while back was I started a group called the Inventors Alliance of Canada. I worked with other inventors
Wow.
as sort of a not thing. And when you look at those 5 steps, you can kind of look at what not to do. And amongst the inventors, I found that a lot of them had these great ideas, but they wouldn't commit. You've got to commit to doing something. You've got to set a goal and say, this is the thing I'm going to do, and this is the time I'm going to do it by. And I found a lot of them didn't do that. The second thing is a lot of them didn't have very good business skills. So you've got to learn about how to do business somehow, watching great podcasts like this, or reading books, or finding out from mentors. And a lot of them didn't tend to have business skills. You can learn those. And the third thing for them was they needed to be flexible. They tended to be really stubborn, and they wouldn't learn much. So you got to be flexible along the way. Now, you said to tell me 5 things, or tell you 5 things. The others would be in the very beginning is you've got to identify a need out there. Where is the world hurting? What seems to need fixing or changing? And a lot of those inventors identified those needs. So that was good. And then, of course, you've got to come up with your unique solution. What is it you're going to do, or that you're going to own, or in my case, having invented a small device, what is it you're going to bring to the world that's different? Now, I'm going to go a little beyond the 5. You've got to make sure that that's going to be profitable. There was one inventor who developed a small thing to put on your fingers to protect your fingers from opening bottle caps, bottles in bars. So you're the bartender, and you hurt your finger. So this little thing would just protect your finger a little bit. Okay, so the need was there. Bartenders struggled with that. The solution was there, and I presume it worked. And most of the inventions I saw did work. But good gosh, how are you going to sell that thing for, oh, I don't know, 50 cents or something like that? You've got to find bartenders all over the place. You've got to be able to market to them and ship this product to them that they're going to pay 50 cents for. So while you might have discovered a need and found a solution for that need, you still have to create a product or a service that's going to be profitable. And that's the tricky part. Everybody comes up with terrific ideas, but can you make it profitable? So that's maybe a little more than 5, but that's my experience with startup inventors.
Yeah. So then, Mark, tell us a little bit more about the inventor world, because I think that it's fascinating, yeah. And sometimes we find inventors out there that they're creating amazing products. They have patents, and the product and the patents never goes anywhere. And the reason for that is exactly what you described. That one thing is inventing one thing, completely different ball game is to build a business about your invention. So
Yeah.
how do you learn how to actually capitalize in your invention, and how do you learn the business side of it to be an inventor, which is something that uh, people might think that is not important, but without that your product will never succeed, correct?
Well, let's talk a little bit about patents, because many of those inventors did come forward and say, oh, I need a patent, or I can't talk to you about it because it's not patented, or it is, or whatever. So my device, the time quarter, I think I spent all of $250 to talk to a lawyer, and he goes, don't bother with a patent. because
Wow.
because the device is um, familiar to those who are trained in the art. I forgot the legal technical words, but somebody who's already developing a chess clock, which is kind of what this is, a chess clock in reverse, or a stopwatch. It's not that unusual. It's new and novel, and it meets that criteria. The device is useful. It meets that criteria. But it's not distinctly new to someone trained in the art. So someone goes, yeah, I kind of got something like that. So I decided not to patent it, and I got trademark on it for sure. And but let's talk a little bit about patents. They don't really protect you that much, only to the degree that you're willing to take on somebody who infringes on your patent. So if somebody copies it, there's no patent police. It's up to you to go look at the infringer and take them
Absolutely.
on and take them to court. And that could be a huge, costly
Of the thing.
endeavor that's not worth it. So the other thing about patents is if you've come up with this unique idea based on your knowledge of technology or needs out there, or whatever, it's kind of likely that somebody else somewhere else has developed something similar. If we look at the history of technology, certainly over the last couple of years, whether it was developing film for cameras or light bulbs or whatever, sure, somebody got the first patent, but there were a lot of people working on those things at the same time. For many inventions, it's hard to really tie down who it was because so many people were working on it. And that's the case today. I think it's not the patent that's going to protect you, but rather your unique selling proposition. What do you do with this thing or your service? How do you market it in a unique way? What is it that you own? In my case, sure, I own some devices, but I also have a methodology for conducting time studies, and we can talk some more about those. I also have a database of a massive amount of information, and that's proprietary to me, and that's what I own, and others aren't likely to get that. So if somebody else develops a
They did
timecoder, I'll
use your
think, well,
device,
that's
right, Mark?
fine. Sorry?
Mark, because you have this database because they were using your device, correct?
That's right. So like if someone else develops one, it doesn't matter because they don't have my methodology and my
100%.
information and my
No,
knowledge
and know
and
your
so on.
database, right?
That's right. So if you're going to develop any business, you don't have to be an inventor, but you do have to come up with this unique selling proposition. What is it that I do that's different from others? Now, there's a lot of people out there who are coaches and it's kind of easy to get into that business. But at least if you're going to be a coach, have some unique methodology that sets you apart. Or interview all of your clients and get some data about the things that they've done that changed their lives or something. But if you just say, oh, I'm a coach, well, everybody does that and it's hard to differentiate yourself. So you need to have a unique selling proposition in whatever business you're going to be in. You also need to pivot, by the way. So back to the timecorder devices. This is not the first version. There was an earlier one that had wood and metal. It was kind of heavy. And it actually turned out to be the world's most popular product that everybody thought somebody else should buy. So I
Wow.
went to people say, "Oh, you sell that to lawyers." Yeah, they said you should sell that to lawyers because they're going to love it. And the lawyers said, "Well, it's not quite right for us, but accountants will like this." And the accountants, we did a little test, and they said, "Yeah, we used it for a couple of weeks and not quite right, but independent consultants, they're going to like this." So I went to the independent consultants, and they said, "Have you talked to the lawyers?" So it was a circle, no
Yeah.
one buying it.
Mark,
But
but what the product
interestingly.
does? Can you describe a little bit more what the product does? What it does?
Yes. So what you have for those who are watching, so you have a series of alphabetic keys, and you turn the device on and up in the corner, and every time you track your time on a different activity, you press a different button. So A would be for travel, and B would for doing paperwork, and C would be for selling. So I give you a little list. So it's kind of like a chess clock in reverse. Chess clocks, the time
Yes.
goes down, the time quarter goes up. and you're only tracking your time on one activity at a time. So
Wow.
it's a little less complicated to use than a doorbell. So if you push a doorbell,
It's
you go
very
to somebody's house, you push the doorbell, you go, did it ring? Where you press the time quarter, you get audio, tactile, and visual feedback that it's tracking your time. So it's dead simple to use. And when I do my time studies, um, people don't like those, but they like ours. They love them. And the reason I get a 94% participation rate is because it's easy to use, it's fun, and the results are all anonymous. I never report on individual results. And that was part of my unique selling proposition. If I ensure people that this is going to be anonymous, then they're going to like tracking their time and contribute to these studies, which will ultimately help them do their jobs better. So oh yeah. So back to the lawyers, though, I skipped there. So I tried selling it to lawyers and accountants. And let me just take a moment, if you don't mind, and give you a list of all the lawyers who ever bought one of my devices. Okay, that's that. We're finished with that. Now we can talk about something else. Yes, the number was zero.
Okay.
So I did sell a few to other consultants and companies doing productivity studies. But that's another thing you need to do as an entrepreneur. You need to pivot. So I was selling these devices at the time for $400 or $600 or something. I think I sold a couple for 2,000. It was a specially designed one for a high-tech company. But anyway, $400 or $500, whatever. And you look at it, you might think, well, it's worth $200. Well, okay. So you sell your inventory and you give up that inventory and you pay for the parts. When I lend them out to organizations to do the time studies, they come back and I charge about $1,200 a person to do that. So I pivoted from selling the device to selling the service, and it's much more profitable
You can
and
rent the
much better
product. You can
long
even give the
term.
product for free. You
I beg
can
your pardon?
you can give the product for free, or you can even rent the product as part of the service. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So I'm kind of renting them out. I mean, I don't say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because
Somebody called me
in
the
the
other
end of the
day.
day, yeah, in the end of the day, Mark, people don't buy the drill, they buy the hole. People don't buy the tool, they buy the end result. Yeah. So they were not interested in having the device. They are interested in the result that the device provides, right?
And my results are I will show organizations how their employees can gain an extra hour per day on their top priority activities. And that's a lot. So if you can get
It's
rid
a
of
lot
all the
in terms
other
of
tasks,
productivity. Yeah. This is something that, and it's constant, it's always change, because tasks change, technology advance and everything. Yeah. Even with our own team, we are always assessing, the productivity and everything and checking the times of performance and everything because sometimes
well,
the,
during
the
COVID,
task, yeah.
when everybody started to work from their home during COVID, there were a lot of employee monitoring systems that came to the fore, and a lot of them were kind of invisible. People were tracking keystrokes or various things. Employees didn't like that. And one of the comments that was made was, well, why do we even care about how they spend their time at home or work or wherever
Absolutely.
they are? And we
Absolutely.
really care about results. And my response to that is, well, first, it should be more proactive and more detailed. So people are tracking the time on important activities to them, like selling or doing paperwork or whatever. But you can think of time as a diagnostic tool. So indeed, we only care about results. But if you're getting impeded, if there's a big impediment to your work that's slowing you down, isn't it worth trying to understand that and measure that? It's like I use the analogy of a runner. So you're in a 100-yard dash, and this person takes 11 seconds, and that person takes 10 seconds. Well, that's all we care about. Well, not really. We should care about, why did this person run faster? It's because of how their heart rate worked, the number of strides per second, the oxygen intake, their muscle mass, and all kinds of diagnostic tools. And if you can understand some of those diagnostics, then you can help that person become a better runner. And so similarly, if you can understand how you're spending your time, then you can help someone become more productive. However many hours they're going to spend at this thing, you got to find out what's getting in the way of their productivity. And that's what's of interest to me.
Yeah, and companies can literally can save millions, right? With the with allocating the time. So why you went so obsessed with productivity?
Well, I started as a newspaper boy decades ago, and people may not know how that works, but if you read a newspaper that gets printed, they would get delivered to a little depot, and I'd pick them up, and then I would deliver them to people's houses. I guess you see that in old movies now. So I was a paper boy, and I delivered, I don't know, 80 or 100 papers per day. And right
Door
from
to
the
door.
beginning, door to door, yeah. And
Wow.
as an 11-year-old kid, somehow I got the idea that I needed to be more productive. So, for instance, on the weekends, there was a newspaper and there was a little color magazine that went inside it. And so you had to put the two together. So I saw the other boys in the depot who would take forever to put them together. And I just figured out here's the fastest way to do it. So that's pure time and motion. How can I set up this activity to do it as quickly as possible? Well, then I'm walking around this route and I figured I could use some technology to help. So I bought myself a wagon. It's much easier to pull the papers around on a wagon than it is carrying, 100 pounds of newspapers on
And
your
you can do it
shoulders.
faster, yeah?
Yep. Another thing is you think about operations research. So how do tasks get lined up and how do they get done? If you're pulling the wagon up one side of the street, but you have to deliver papers on the other side of the street, well, do I take three papers across the street with me or do I just take one? You could also fold up the papers, and you've seen that in old movies, kids throwing the papers. Well, it takes a few seconds to fold up a paper. I think I could still do it today. But the question is, do I spend that time unfolding the paper or do I just walk to the door or can I sort of toss it up? So that's operations research and thinking about where the efficiencies lie. And then another one, I had to go and collect from people every single week. And in retrospect, this is crazy. Some people paid at the office by credit card or something. But you'd actually go knock on the door on Tuesday
To
night
collect
and
the
say,
papers,
"Hi,
right?
Mark. Yeah, and I'm collecting from the Star and you owe me this much money." Well, that's very inefficient. So what I did is I divided the route in half. And instead of going every week, I went to half of the people on one week and charged them for 2 weeks, and then the other half on the other week and charged them for 2 weeks. So I was batching jobs together and creating some efficiencies. And so all those things that I did way back then kind of it was about how do I finish delivering my papers and collecting as fast as possible. And all those techniques still
Because
work
if you
today.
finish fast, they're gonna pay you the same money, but you can be sitting at home, right?
That's right. Um, so
You
faster I could do the stuff, the better.
yeah. And this is how all entrepreneurs start. Sometimes they solve the problem for themselves and say, hey, I can solve the problem for other people, right?
Yep.
Yes.
So then as an adult, I guess I was thinking about productivity as well. And one time I was working for a large company and everybody was late for a meeting. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is crazy. There was just a bad culture of starting meetings late. And so I thought, gee, this is costing us a lot. If you take your time and his time and add it up, I thought, you could measure that, or you could have a little device, or actually you could measure different things. So there was a kind of an aha moment that happened there where I, in my mind, created this tracking device that would track these different activities. And so we all come up with those ideas. The thing though is to not lose sight of that and to stick with it and say, I'm going to do something about this. And so I had to go out and create a prototype and figure out how to make them and so on. But a lot of people come up with ideas and, well, I came up with that. And you don't want to go through life kicking yourself and saying, I had that idea and I didn't do something about it. I'm kicking myself as opposed to, well, I did do that idea and I may have succeeded or not, but at least I followed my dream and my passion.
Mark, tell us about this process because this is something, yeah, that we have tech entrepreneurs out there today. They have a misconception. Yeah, I want to see how was your approach. Yeah, when you created what you call it minimum viable product, an MVP. Yeah, this is when you went there and created a prototype. Yeah, the big issue that we have in the tech space today is that minimum viable product, the people forgot the word M at the beginning and they don't
Mhm.
create the minimum viable anymore. They create that software that is gonna save the world, that is patented, that it will revolutionize the way that we're gonna do, and then they ask for the money for the seed funding, for the family, for the friends, they remortgage the house, and they create this huge elephant rather than an MVP. And then, it happens what it happens that there are nowhere that is
Yep.
going to be around 100 iterations of that product until actually, out of the 500 multimillionaires that I invite in interview already in this podcast, I haven't found anybody yet that tell me, Harry, the first product that I invented, that I created exactly like this is what the clients want. I haven't
Well, I
found
can tell you
anybody
a
yet.
little
Yeah. So how was your
I
process?
can
Did
tell you
you
about
go
that
crazy?
process, but let me just skip a little bit because you mentioned financing, and then I'll come back to the development
Yeah,
process.
yeah.
And it's later, I do want to tell you about some of the data that we found from the database. But first on financing, I ran these inventors groups, and people would say, "I need money, I need an investor, I just need someone to invest." And I would ask them, maybe as someone who's 40 years old, I said, tell me about your assets or your finances. Well, I live in an apartment. Well, what kind of savings do you have? Well, not much. And I just thought to myself, if you're 40 years old and you don't have any net savings, any net worth, it's probably unlikely that you're going to have the financial wherewithal to be able to manage money of your own or whether someone gives it to you or an investor or whatever. You should have shown over time that you've saved up at least some money. And I had a house and a mortgage, but I'd saved some money and I was able to leverage that. But if you've got no money, you probably haven't done a good job over the years of managing your finances, and you're not likely to be someone who's going to be able to run the finances of your company well. I'm not basing on that anything except some of the people that I worked with. So, but you talked about minimum prototypes and so on. So back to my story. Um, I'm not an engineer. I'm not an electrician. I knew a little bit about being a disc jockey, and I could make a little control board to control my light show or something like that. So I went to the guy who fixed my electronics, my speakers for being a
Wow.
disc jockey. I said, "Can you make this little prototype for me?" And oh, it was grief. After a couple of months, he got a little screen and he was able to get it to count to 10. And I thought, that doesn't work.
Uh,
Anyway, I
wow.
was involved with the JCs. That's a volunteer organization of young people doing community projects. And I happened to mention this to a friend. And he goes, well, I'm a computer engineer, electronics engineer. And I said, really? He said, yeah, I can make a prototype for you. And I thought, really?
Wow.
So I paid him, this is quite a number of years ago, well, 1989, I paid him $6,000 to build two prototypes for me. And I still have one of them. It's big and clunky, but it worked. It did what it was supposed to do, which was track your time on these different
1999.
activities.
Wow.
Yeah, $6,000 to make these. So I got two of them.
And
And
I
then
went
I
big like that,
gave
right?
one of them, yeah, it was a big, heavy thing. And they were slightly different in terms of the functionality. But I had to figure out what the functionality was going to be. When you push this button, what shows up on the screen? If you hit the wrong button, what happens? And for me, that was a fascinating process to come up with the ergonomics of the device and how to make it simple. As I said, it's a little less complicated to use than a doorbell. So that was
Very
my
simple to use.
contribution. So once he developed the prototypes, I happened to be I left my full-time job. I was doing some contract work, and I found a bookkeeper. And I said, can you use this time quarter device for a couple of weeks and tell me how it works? She did, and she came back and said, Mark, that's great. It really works well. Drop everything and go and launch this thing. Now, a bookkeeper, so the idea was to sell devices to people like her, and that didn't work, but it got me going anyway. 6 months later, I had a launch party and we launched the new product. We had them just about finished, and I was trying to sell them there, and it didn't work. Well, the device worked, but the sales didn't work. And so it was a few months later, one of my buddies, and I'd already been thinking about this, said, well, why don't you sell the service rather than the product? And I happened to get on a national television show, kind of a reality show that followed inventors around and entrepreneurs. And from that, I got a number of phone calls. And when one of the guys said, I run a sales force and we need to know how our salespeople spend their time, I thought, yes, great. And so then I had to invent the business. How do I, program the
Deliver that
devices, and how
service.
do I get people to track their time, and how do I analyze the results? So not only did I invent the device, but I had to invent the service that went with it. Oh, and by the way, there are some of your listeners or viewers who are thinking, oh, that's nice, Mark. Why don't you make an app version? And I've been asked about this many times. Well, a couple of reasons. One, I get a participation rate of 94%. That ain't going to go anywhere but down if you develop an app. So it works well. Why? There's no business reason to change that. People like opening up these boxes and getting the device. It's tracking the time that you're spending on your other devices. And here's something. I worked with
Easy to use.
PricewaterhouseCoopers. I got
It's
a
also
contract
easy to
with them,
use.
with the Ontario government, and it was unionized people. There's absolutely no way that union would have agreed to going to my website, downloading my app, having me got access to your phone and all your personal data and so on. It just wouldn't have gone anywhere. So the union liked the idea that it was a separate device and I didn't have access to your information and so
Absolutely,
on.
because
And
the less the less that organization want is to have the people with the phone around, because they get distracted doing something else.
yeah, yeah. Well, we're measuring the
While
things
they're
you do on
working.
your phone, and it's ergonomically simpler. A quick story about that union. We had won the contract, and we went in to see the union, and I was a little nervous, even though we had already won the contract.
Oh,
So I showed them the device, and there was a little card that had the activities listed on it. And the woman said, "Yeah, that's kind of what we figured. That card, could you make the font a little bit bigger?" And I thought, well,
they want it bigger?
of course, that's easy. So most companies probably wouldn't either because again, you're accessing all people's personal information and so on. So it's a separate device, and that's why it's better than an app. The batteries last longer, it gives you instant feedback. There's a whole bunch of reasons. So anyway, I had to pivot, and that's the lesson for entrepreneurs. Instead of selling the device, and I did sell some, I sold the service instead. And that's much more profitable and it's more unique. And so there's a huge lesson learned there.
But then, Mark, here's the thing, right? Because you are you surrender yourself to the initial idea, which is sell the product, and you were open to offer the service instead. Yeah. So the issue that we have sometimes with entrepreneurs of that is that they design a product in the way they want it to sell it to the marketplace, and they say, "Well, my product is so good. If you don't buy it, that's fine. Somebody else will buy." And they're reluctant to pivot. They're reluctant to listen to the client. Yeah, and sometimes it's a different conversation. You can have an amazing product. You can have a patented product. You can have a product that everybody say, "Wow, why do you don't give it to the lawyers? Wow, why you don't give it to the accountant?" Everybody was taking it. I said, "This is amazing," but but in
Well,
the format it is, I don't need it, I don't want it. But that doesn't mean that it's not necessary. What it means is that we have to give the clients what they really want, which is the clients what they will really want out of this tool. The first thing is the end result. They really want to know the data and the results because that's what's gonna save the money, right?
Well, there's two sides to this. On the one hand, it's about being persistent. On the other hand, it's about being stubborn. And those are two sides. So
100%.
persistence says, I know this, and I had some early data that this was working, that the people were taking to it. But it's hard in the initial days to sell it. But stubborn is not a good thing. And so it's like, oh no, this is it. This is going to work. And as an entrepreneur, you can't be too stubborn. At some point, you have to say, the world is telling me something here. The universe is giving me a message.
You have to
And
be able to
I've
see it.
received a few of those messages. Often, someone will inquire about my services and then they'll just drop out and something else comes up. So I have to deal with that reality. But I've been fortunate that over the years, I've had enough business that's, kept me in a good lifestyle. But there is a little bit of stubbornness, persistence that's needed. Persistence means keep going when you've got some evidence that this thing is going to work. Stubborn means make some changes and don't stick with this thing forever, and pivot when you need to.
So Mark, yeah, because at the end of the day, we have these things like you know, a lot of people say, don't give up, don't give up, don't give up. Okay. But how many times have you seen a fly to go through a glass window? Correct. So, so
Right.
it's about two things. It's don't give up, but also change your approach. If you don't change your approach, exactly what you described, if you're stubborn, it doesn't matter that you don't give up. The flight will never, ever, ever go through a glass window. Correct?
Well, yeah, and you've got to read the signs. And for me, the first sign, and after I appeared on that national show, and the sales manager guy called me up, and I was still working things out at the time, so I had them track their time, and I went to their office and used their computer to upload the information onto their computer. Now, I never did that since, but anyway, and it was interesting because I brought up the results on the screen, and they were fairly crude. All the sales reps were gathered around and were looking at the results and were fascinated to see what
Wow.
was going on. And I thought, there's something. And they tracked their time very diligently on a high number of activities. So I thought, I'm onto something here. When they all gathered around and wanted to see the results, I knew at that moment that I was onto something. So you gotta have to read those signs out there.
So
When a
how you
customer
feel it
says,
when you find out that this business model that you thought that is gonna work, actually you have to pivot? Do you feel excited? Do you have some resistance? Do you say, oh my God, I need to spend more money now because now I have to develop like this. I already spent 6,000. So how was your feeling when you said, oh my God, I have to start all over again because they don't want to
well,
go, they want the
it,
same.
it, it wasn't fun.
It's
I had
like
to go
starting
back.
all over again, right?
Well, in my case, I had to go back and get a couple of more loans, and I was paying a high amount of interest for a loan, a private
Oh,
loan,
you
I think
have
I
to
got.
believe about your product,
Um,
right?
it took a while, but after 2 or 3 years, I was starting to get more of those contracts, and things were starting to kick in a little bit more. So there's another lesson. Imagine that you're not going to have any sales for the first 12 months of your business. If you run a retail store, that's a little different. But if you're an independent consultant like
Tech,
me, or somebody selling new things,
yeah, a tech
um,
entrepreneur.
yeah, you better have some savings. You better have a bit of a rainy day fund to get you through those
Yeah,
tough
because it's
times.
very profitable. It's very profitable, but people don't talk about how the beginnings. You see, one out of five, 1 out of 6, the rate is people that come to this podcast. They are all tech entrepreneurs and tech multimillionaires. And people could be having the wrong assumption that because a lot of tech entrepreneurs come to this podcast, 5 Step How to Make Your First Million, people can, the other ones are property investors, the people can be on the
Yep.
entrepreneur solution that is easy to become a millionaire doing tech. It's easy to become a millionaire doing property. That is very lucrative when it works, but 98% of we never talk about the 98% that never make it. So
Yeah.
uh,
Just in terms of the businesses, so I've got a physical product, it's got a keyboard and, electronic circuit board and so on. In the last, well, since the year 2000, a lot of people were developing websites. So I'm going to develop this website. And what I discovered is a lot of them were just intermediaries. I'm going to provide this service to restaurants in the area, or I'm going to do this or that or whatever. And the website was just kind of a conduit. And I think that era has sort of passed. You need something real that you're delivering. So it's Uber cars driving around, or, it's Amazon deliveries or something. Whereas just pure websites that are just kind of a conduit between this and that, I find tend to be less successful. So those websites are easy to develop compared to an electronic device. There's lots of people who will develop an app or a website for you, but you better have a unique selling proposition and a unique market because otherwise someone else can duplicate that or that service is already out there. So, for instance, a lot of people were trying to sell online courses. Well, all right, you've developed the intellectual property for the course, but it's tough selling courses online. It's tough selling a lot of things online. So having something that has a real element to it, a physical thing or a delivery service or something, is probably going to be a more sustainable business than just a pure website.
Yeah, and also yeah, because you have the interaction with the real world, with the physical work and the data work, which is this is the success
Yep.
of all these companies have lied into the interaction between the online and the offline. If that makes
I
sense.
should I should tell you a bit about some of the findings from my database. Are you curious to hear about some of that?
Yes, absolutely. Tell us. We're looking
Well,
forward to
so
hear about it.
um, one of the things I go to these time use conferences every year and show up and present some data. And at these time use conferences, one of the things that comes up repeatedly is that domestically, at home, women do more of the housework than men. They do more childcare, shopping, cooking, cleaning, and so on. And I thought, well, what does that look like in the workplace? Does that translate? So I took my database and I've got thousands of people's names and I split it up into two. I did women in one half of the database and men in the other. And I looked at a whole bunch of different analyses and I came up with four major findings that led me to conclude that women are better at managing their time in the workplace than men. It's quite profound. Women are better time managers than men. And so the first of those findings was that women actually work fewer hours than men. Now, my database is knowledge workers, people working in offices or maybe out of their homes. And typically, men work about 48 hours per week. These are sales reps and account managers and service managers and so on. Now, of that 48 hours, there's about three or four that's personal breaks and lunch and so on. So the actual is a little bit lower than that. But if the men are at 48 hours, the women are only at 45 hours. And so why is that? Well, who's got to get home to take care of those kids and pick them up from
And
daycare and make
multitask,
dinner?
and multitask, and do this
Yep.
and do that. Yeah,
But the second finding is probably most important to your audience because of your entrepreneurs, and they think about where do I need to be spending my time? So this works for entrepreneurs, and I've studied a lot of independent consultants, and I've studied office workers. And so if you read time management books, what they tell you is spend your time on your important activities. Well, what's that? You could say salespeople should be selling. Well, what's that based on? Is it based on their job description or what you see them doing? So during my studies, I actually ask people before we start, what are the most important things you need to do in your job? So you can look at sales reps and managers and construction supervisors and so on, and they all answer that question. Now, a sales rep might say, I got to sell, I got to service my clients, I got to process the orders. But the thing that stands out the most is selling. And so that's an important activity for them. And in the time management books, you'll see something about the important urgent matrix. You shouldn't be doing urgent things all the time. You should be doing important things. But again, that's not well defined. So for the first time, I think I've mapped that. So this is what people are telling us is important, and here's how they're spending their time. And this works for many of your entrepreneurs as well. Turns out that if you look at those high priority tasks, the things they're supposed to be doing most of, they're only doing it, all employees and managers and independent consultants are only spending 20% of their time on their top priority activities. And you go, only 20%? Well, yeah, because you're doing administrative work, you're going to meetings, you're traveling, you're taking lunch, you're reading, catching up on things. And so the high priority is just 20%. Now, here's the big difference. Women are at 22%, men are only at 18%. So women are spending more of their time on their highest priority activities. Now, 20%, you can get that higher, and certainly we've seen people up to 30 or 35%. And so my definition of productivity is how much of your time are you spending on your highest priority activities? And to do that, you got to get rid of the low priority activities. So for your entrepreneurs, how do you do that? You have to automate, you have to delegate, you've got to create systems. And so that's very important for them to be productive.
Yeah, that Mike, this is fantastic. This is absolutely spectacular. So, Mark, tell us, if somebody's in love with the conversation and want to learn more about how to about timing, about how to get more efficient at the workplace, and about some of these find outs that you have out of the that data that you guys have, and even now even better, Mark, because now we are in the AI world, so in the AI technology, and you know how it is, the AI that it doesn't do anything if it doesn't have a good database, because the AI need to learn from something. Yeah, if you don't have nothing to learn with, the AI is useless. So having big data like you have right now, and how we can use this data, um, and to use AI to maximize productivity. This is something that also could be a huge future for you, because you do have what a lot of people are looking for like crazy. A lot of people are looking for data because they
Yep.
want the AI to learn out of this data. Well, this is something that you have and a lot. Yeah. So
Yes.
if somebody wants to, I don't know, to develop an AI tool to use your data and to create a new product, or someone is interested about productivity, about timings, everything, how can they find you? How this process work?
Well, I grabbed a URL many years ago. It's getmoredone.com.
Ah, it
So
sounds amazing.
just go to just go to
Good one.
getmoredone.com, and my email is mark@getmoredone.com. But you mentioned AI, and let me talk about that a little bit. I started doing these studies in 1990. That's 34 years ago.
Wow.
And back then, we didn't have voicemail. We didn't have email. We
No
didn't have
Facebook, no?
a, no, there was a few laptops around. We didn't have smartphones. So there's been a lot of technology that's been introduced over those 34 years. And here's the big finding, the sort of meta finding. People, employees that I study, are no more productive than they were 34 years ago.
Well,
Because
well, they are
with
more distracted,
with
right?
every new technology, it comes with unexpected spin-offs and side effects. In the world of communication, we keep inventing more and more ways to be out of touch with each other. Let me give you an example. So you think, oh, he's just talking. Well, I've measured it. So take email. Now listen, email really works well, and it's been a terrific productivity improvement for the whole world. However, it comes with those unexpected spin-offs and side effects. So we've measured what employees considered to be unnecessary email. It was up to them to decide. So they were measuring email on all their different activities, but they also measured unnecessary email. Now, not everybody measures this, but amongst the hundreds of people who have measured it, get ready for this. It's 3.4 hours per week. Now that's huge, and that didn't exist 30 years ago. So we've got email really working well, but it's also a burden. And so similarly, other technologies. Listen, cybersecurity didn't exist 30 years ago. You didn't have to have passwords and things. So AI, I think, will be the same. It will have a lot of benefits to it, and that will help us in many ways. And some people will use it better than others. But it will come with unanticipated side effects. There will be bad players, there will be criminals, there will be hackers. And so it's just like any other technology. So smart people use technology well in the face of all the people who are abusing it. And here's what I know. We may replace people's jobs with AI. We might ship those jobs off to another country. We might automate them or whatever. But as long as knowledge workers are going to be doing knowledge work in 5 years from now or 10 years from now, and their jobs might change, but there will probably always be managers and supervisors. But as long as people are doing knowledge work, my data says they will continue to be burdened with administrative tasks, with non-value added tasks, going to meetings and filling out reports and correcting things and dealing with errors and so on. And so the trick is, and if that's 25% of their time, which it is for managers, then the challenge is how do you reduce that? Use AI, use automation, delegate, whatever, to reduce that so you're not being burdened. But the average is most people will. So we talk about productivity improvements, and they will happen. But as long as you have knowledge workers doing knowledge work, they will be burdened by administrative tasks. And the challenge is how to measure that and then get rid of some of those tasks to become more productive.
Wow, Mark, that's amazing. Thank you so much for this broadcast and for all of you following this Unstoppable podcast. See you in our next episode. How brave entrepreneurs like Mark break that wall and achieve the first million. Bye for now.
Follow us for more interviews with the world's most influential, audacious entrepreneurs that overcame challenges and adversity, providing you with the blueprint of how they sold their first million so you can grow your business exponentially.